Welcome in to the latest edition of MISL Weekly. My name's Nicholas Murray, very pleased to be joined by Chris Economides. Welcome in, Chris.
Good morning, good afternoon, Nicholas. Pleasure to be on.
And a welcome back to David Wagner after a 2-week hiatus. David, hope you're doing well. Been off traveling a little bit, I hear?
Yeah, thanks for having me back here.
Well, welcome back in, and I hope you guys had a good Thanksgiving. I definitely enjoyed myself down in Port Charlotte, Punta Gorda, down the coast here in Florida. What were you guys up to over the weekend?
Well, David was out jet setting. He went to Aruba. He went to Brazil. He was it was a nice peaceful Thanksgiving. Had family in town. Did a lot of what I do best when I'm not working. That's lounging on the couch. So it was a nice peaceful time.
Did you borrow Chris's jet for that travel, David?
Yeah, my jet, also known as my Honda Civic, drove up to North Carolina. It was really exciting.
Well, I'm glad you all had a great time, and we had two really good games this weekend. I mean, we went in expecting a better competition than the first time these two sets of teams met, and we start off on Friday night. Tremendous game between the Missouri Comets and the St. Louis Ambush. More than 5,000 fans in attendance at the Family Arena, and for a while there, it certainly looked as though it was taking on the shape of the first meeting between the Ambush and the Comets. Comets getting out to a 6-0 halftime lead, another early goal making it 8-0 early in the third quarter. But I thought really good resilience by the Ambush to come back, force overtime, and definitely a great contest that went right down to the wire into overtime.
Yeah, it was a really fun game to watch. I watched it that night, and I thought the same thing. I'm like, oh, here we go again. But you know what? Credit to St. Louis. They stuck in there, got right back in the game. They made some plays. They were probably unlucky not to get some other goals early on, but they came back. But Missouri was just too much. I'm just really impressed this year by the play of Leo Gibson. I think he's really making it tick for them. The veteran players like Brian Harris that they have there are really playing solid from the back too. So for me this year, Missouri has just been fantastic, and just hats off to them again, because it was a really great performance by St. Louis to come back, but they showed their class.
It really is interesting to see what Leo Gibson has become since they moved him up into an attacking position.
Yep.
He'd been a defender for most of his career and played very solidly at the back for the Comets throughout his first 3 seasons there. But midway through last season, they have some injuries up front. They figure, let's put Leo up there, see what he can do. Start scoring boatloads of goals, and now he's become that kind of pivot that maybe Byron Alvarez kind of acted as previously. It's Gibson that's the guy who's holding play up, who's linking up really well with Vahid Asadpour, who's having another great season for them.
Yeah.
And everything seems to start now be circling around him. Alvarez gets on the score sheet for the first time this season, but the guy I want to talk about is Stephen St. Louis, who had the overtime game winner. And for me, this is just a great story, because he had his season cut short last year, suffered a knee injury in late January, missed the end of the season, and for him to come back, get that first goal after coming back from injury, for it to be an overtime game winner, got to be a huge boost of confidence for him.
Absolutely. Credit to both teams. Excuse me. I thought St. Louis, and they've got a great indoor legend coach in Daryl Duran. I knew that Daryl would make some adjustments, to sort of counter what happened the previous week, and he did. And then credit to Missouri, where these are games that as being an established team, that they need to win. And you know what? They did the things that they needed to do to win the game. And again, a great story of Stephen St. Louis, and how ironic is that a guy named St. Louis scores against St. Louis. But anyways, you know what? It was a great game, a fun game to watch. And again, one of the most encouraging things is over 5,000 again at the arena in St. Louis.
Certainly a fun one for the headline writers there, and had that experience last night actually with my team, Cambridge United. Luke Berry scored the goal that beat Berry in the FA Cup. So a little fun pieces of wordplay all across the soccer landscape, from the MISL over to England as well. The other guy, though, the guy that really stood out for me for the Ambush, was O'Dane Sinclair.
Yeah.
And this is a young guy, he's a rookie, come out of Jamaica, come out of a small college in the Midwest, Baker College, I believe it is.
Yep.
And 5 goals already. He had 2 goals in this game, and he seemed to be the guy that really sparked that comeback. He seems to be learning very quickly. He seems to be adapting to the indoor game very quickly. Certainly a really nice start to his rookie indoor season with 11 points 11 points so far.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head, Nicholas. That was the next point I was going to make for St. Louis, is that what Gibson kind of has been or was in that game for Missouri, I think Sinclair was for St. Louis. When St. Louis scored a goal, you could pick your head up and okay, Sinclair's there, because he was going to be involved somehow in every play, and he was brilliant. He was the man that made things happen for St. Louis that game, and you're right, he's acclimating to the game, and he's only going to get better as the season goes on, because that's how it works in indoor for guys that are a little bit new to the game.
I think for a guy like Sinclair, having a guy like Dan Antoniuk to learn from, who's been around, he's played a lot of indoor soccer, played a lot of good outdoor soccer as well. Having a guy like him to learn off, and I think Antoniuk had a goal and I think 2 assists on in Friday's game. He's really played very solidly to open up the season. Having a guy like that to kind of learn the game from and to just watch in practice, obviously a big boost for Sinclair as he learns this game.
Yeah, I actually know Dizzy pretty well. That's his nickname is Dizzy.
Dizzy Dan.
Yeah, he played for me in Carolina with the Railhawks. Quality guy, like I said, he's been around the block in terms of played, on a lot of teams indoor and outdoor. So I thought it was a solid signing by St. Louis to bring somebody of his stature. He's a big body.
Yep.
I think Sinclair's going to learn well from a seasoned pro like Dan. So again, they're off to a decent start, and they're headed in the right direction.
It'll be interesting to see how they fare. They get a week off now, and they get a week 2 weeks to prepare for the Syracuse Silver Knights on the road, which is their next matchup. Syracuse, still undefeated, made to work though on Sunday by the Pennsylvania Roar. Very tight game, 10-9 final, but I don't think Syracuse was quite at its best. They had some injuries. They suffered an injury to Mikhail Millward during the game. After he had a very nice goal, very nice assist to put them up, to give them that nice lead in the third quarter. But I thought this was a good win for Syracuse, but a very positive performance by the Roar overall.
Yeah, I think the same analogy here, positives from both sides. Obviously, Pennsylvania being an expansion team, they're going to go through the growing pains, going through the learning curve. They made progress over their first 3 games. Not the result that they wanted, obviously, but tremendous progress being made. From a Syracuse perspective, again, they're off to a 4-0 start. These are the games that they, as an established team, should win. They took care of business, even with the injuries. So overall, Syracuse has to be pleased. And
you have a guy like Slavica Ubi-Parapovic who picks up another pair of goals. He now leads the league in points, and he's really kind of taken that step forward that I think we were expecting to see from him last year after his Rookie of the Year season.
Yep.
But they were without Neto on Sunday.
Yep.
Millward went down with what appeared to be a hamstring injury, so he'll get a week to try and recover from that before they face the ambush. But you have Ubi Parapovic stepping up, you have LJ Papaleo stepping up, and getting the goals that they needed to hold off what was a pretty spirited rally by the Roar in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think that the point I made at the beginning of the year is I think that for Syracuse this year, this is going to be really their breakout year, kind of what this season in USL Pro was for the LA Blues, where you had a team like Syracuse who obviously has a lot of attacking talent. We talked about Ubi Parapovic. They added some guys like Millwood and others. I think this is the get over the hump year essentially for them, where maybe the bounces and the calls start going a little bit more in their direction and those goals go in. And I think that's what's going to be the difference for them this year is they have the talent that's there. I think the bounces just didn't quite go their way last year, but I think Syracuse is a playoff team because they have a lot of talent this year and they're showing that they can put it together. Obviously, Pennsylvania played a better game this week, but Syracuse shone through and they're still undefeated.
Another parallel to the Syracuse Silver Knights. Another Orange team, the Dayton Dutch Lions.
That's right.
USL Pro past year, who made the playoffs for the first time. Certainly, you can see some parallels between those two clubs. And
from an attacking standpoint, definitely.
From the way that they've built themselves up from the ground.
Yep.
This is now a team that understands the way it wants to play. It's got some seasoned veterans in now with Millwood, and you've got these young players like Kanado Forbes, like Slavisa Uber-Parapovic, who are now coming into their own and are really ready to be potentially all-league players at the end of the season.
You know what? Not because he was my captain for 10 years, but, you got to give Tommy Tanner a lot of credit.
Yes.
He's done a great job there. He's built that franchise from the ground up. He stuck to his guns, even though they had a couple of tough years. They're growing together as a team, as an organization. You know what? You got to admire his loyalty. You got to admire his perseverance. Good things happen to good people, and you know what? I'm happy for Tommy.
Now, on the parallels, talking about another quick parallel here, we talked about O'Dane Sinclair earlier. I think a guy that's coming into his own and in his rookie season in the MISL for Pennsylvania is JoJo Gibson. He had another couple of goals. I think he has 7 points now. I think he leads the war in points right now. And he's a guy that seems to be fitting in. He's certainly proving to be a handful for defenses. He's a big, strong guy. Played with the Virginia Beach Piranhas, I believe it was, in the PDL last summer. And he's a guy that's now stepping into the pro ranks, and he's kind of finding his way in the indoor game. Certainly could be a guy to watch as far as the all-rookie team at the end of the year.
Yeah, I agree, and it's important to have those strong physical players in MISL. There's a couple ways you can go on your attack. Obviously, you can, if you're building up the field and you have some quick passes and get that shot, but also playing that long ball up from the back and having a hold-up guy is really important too. So having that physical presence on the team is really important. And if you have a rookie like that and come in, get acclimated to the league, get acclimated to the physicality of it, and being able to create your own shot is important. He's proved he can do that so far.
Useful speed on the counter-attack as well. He does seem to get up and down the floor very quickly. So that's another string to his bow, as it were, as far as what he can bring to that team and what hopefully he can start to bring more of as the season goes on. Now the Raw, they'll be in action this weekend. They get to carry on, but we do have a very big game and a very big rematch this Saturday night at US Cellular Arena as the Milwaukee Wave host their home opener against the Baltimore Blast. Now, I'll be talking with you guys about that in just a moment, but we had the chance to talk with Blast coach Danny Kelly about the game, and that interview will be coming up just after this break. Well, we're very pleased to be joined now by the head coach of the Baltimore Blast, Danny Kelly. Danny, thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
You're welcome, Nicholas. Thanks for having me on. Happy to be here.
Well, first of all, congratulations on the championship. Congratulations on the banner raising, but I'm guessing not quite the way you hoped you envisioned the game going against the Milwaukee Wave the last time out. What was that night like, and what was that like to go through from a coaching perspective?
Well, obviously, proud of our accomplishment, winning the championship last season. I thought guys had a great year. Obviously very proud of that. This is a brand new season. So going into that game against Milwaukee, knowing it was going to be a very tough contest, knowing they'd be highly motivated. It was a game where I didn't think we played very well. A game where they sat back defensively and defended very well. Got guys in front of the ball, blocked shots. Nick Warburg had a great game, and we were frustrated offensively. Couldn't seem to generate much, and just one of those games where the ball wasn't going to go in the back of the net. We hit the post. Defenders made some blocks. Warburg played very well. Obviously, a very disappointing performance, in your home opener when you're raising the banner. But at the end of the day, it's one game. We got to learn from it and move on.
You've obviously got a very strong core of players returning. Is there anyone in particular that you're looking to this season to maybe have jump forward and maybe have a little bit of a breakout season after spending the last year or last couple of seasons with you guys?
I think, Lucas Roque, had I thought a very good rookie season. And a lot of times, after that learning curve, after that first year, that second season, they really, have a breakout year. And I'm hoping, that's what happens with Lucas. He's a talented player, very skillful with the ball. He's got good pace. He's got a nose for the goal, and I'm just hoping he continues on his path. Another guy is Marco Mangione, who again I thought is a rookie player, had a very solid first year. He can do a little bit of everything. He's more of a midfield type player, but can strike the ball very well. Had 3 goals against Rochester in the opening game for us in Rochester's home opener. He's another guy that I think is capable of having a very good year. Another guy is Levi Wapu, who he trained with us a bit last season. Came into camp, looked very good. We signed him, and he's looked sharp in training camp and in a couple of games we've had so far. So those 3 guys, I think Levi, Marco, and Lucas are 3 guys that I'm looking at to hopefully get us back to where we want to be.
Now, you've obviously looked at the tape in the last couple of weeks from that Wave game. Is there anything that you saw that you'd like to adjust ahead of Saturday's matchup?
Oh, we need to do a lot of things better. I think first and foremost, our movement offensively wasn't what it needed to be. If your movement offensively is stagnant and you're not making the defense move, I think it's only going to create problems for yourself. And to be honest, there was 1 3-point goal was off Lucio, our own player's head, trying to head it back to the keeper. The other goal was a ball where we got dispossessed in the midfield, and the shot deflected off one of our defenders' foot. So, there's 6 points right there. We got to be better in all aspects of the game as far as I'm concerned. We gave away 2 own goals. That's 6 points there. So basically we gave up 3 goals and lost the game. Offensively, we got to be better. We got to finish our opportunities that we do get. So, we have to open them up. We score a few goals, and maybe their strategy changes a little bit. So scoring early, scoring a few goals will definitely be important for us going into Milwaukee.
With it being their home opener, there's obviously, I think, a little bit of expectation on a home team to come out, set their stall up, try and play some attractive, play some exciting soccer. Are you expecting the game to be a little more open, a little bit more up and down than it was last time out?
I'd like it to be, but we'll adjust to whatever the game brings. If Milwaukee decides to sit back, then we'll do what we have to do. If they want to play up and down, then we'd love to do that as well. So. I'm all for, up and down soccer, watching attractive soccer, attacking soccer. But, there's all different ways to win games in this league, and ultimately it's about winning games. And right now we're 1-1, and we're looking to improve on that come Saturday night.
We're obviously about 3 weeks into the season now. We've got a few games under our belts, and obviously there's a lot of interesting stuff going on around the league, one of which is the Syracuse Silver Knights. Have you gotten a chance to see their games yet, and what have you seen out of them, having jumped out to a really nice 4-0 beginning to the season?
I've gotten to see one of their games, and they just look like a team that's continuing to grow. We had the opportunity to actually scrimmage them in the preseason, and it just looks like they're good players are getting better. Slavisa Parapovic, I think, is one of the top players in the league. Nelson Santana is, as good as he is a defender, he's just as good going forward and creating problems for the other team. Neto up front to them is a dangerous forward, and I think they're playing a little bit better defensively this year. They've had some new additions. Michelle Millwood, obviously, has helped them out in their run so far this season. But I just think they're better players, or are playing well, and they're playing better defense, and they're capitalizing on their opportunities.
You obviously had your home opener spoiled by the Wave. Would it mean a lot? Is there a little bit of a revenge factor here going in with it being their home opener and trying to turn the tables on them?
I don't really look at it in that way. We're going in there to try and win a game. Whether it's their home opener or their 15th game of the season, to me it doesn't matter. It is what it is, and we just got to be better than we were in our first game here in Baltimore. Hopefully we play a little bit better on the road than we did it in Baltimore.
Obviously, these are the 2 most storied franchises, the longest tenured franchises in indoor soccer in the United States. Does that add to the rivalry? And it's got to be a nice feeling when you do get one up on the Wave, and I'm sure it feels the same way when they get one up on you.
I think both franchises have been very successful, winning. Correct me if I'm wrong, but 13 or 14 of the last 16, 17 championships. So both franchises very successful. Both franchises, want to win a championship every year, and this year is no different. And we love to beat Milwaukee. We love to beat Syracuse, St. Louis, and whomever. So is it a little bit more when I think Baltimore's playing Milwaukee? I think sure, yes, because we want to prove to them that we're the best team, and I think the vice versa is also true. So I think Saturday night will be a very good game, a very competitive game, and hopefully we can come out on top.
Well, Danny, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really appreciate it, and best of luck this weekend.
Thanks a lot, Nicholas. Thanks for having me on. Take care. Bye-bye.
Obviously very interesting talking to Danny Kelly. It's the first time that the Baltimore Blast had ever been shut out at home in their 34-year history, when Nick Vorberg and the Wave did that to them a couple of weeks ago. I'm expecting another playoff-type game, certainly a playoff-type atmosphere at US Cellular Arena. It should be a packed house there. The Blast did have a big advantage in shots in that last game. How do they turn that from shots on goal to avoiding the blocks that Milwaukee was able to accumulate, and turn those into goals and kind of turn the tables a little bit on the Wave from last time around?
If I could answer that, I'd be a rich man. You're right on, Nicholas. It's going to be a great game, a great atmosphere there. I just got off the phone with Keith Tozer. There are over 6,000 to 7,000 tickets already pre-sold for the opener there. They're great post-game concert with Daughtry. Okay, help me here, guys. So it should be a playoff-like atmosphere in Milwaukee this weekend. And anytime those two teams meet, they could be playing. If they could be 0-20 and still playing, it's going to be a war out there. So, going back to your original question, how often do you see a shutout in indoor soccer? I mean, it was just one of those days, one of those things. Maybe a couple of shots that that could have gone in, hit the post or whatever. It just wasn't meant to be. I would be shocked, if we had a replay of that. But it's going to be a great game. It's going to be a must-watch for the fans. Great atmosphere there. And it's what indoor soccer is all about.
I think you hit it on the head with the fact that a shutout like that is such a freak occurrence, right? But obviously with how Milwaukee came into that game, how they prepared for that game was fantastic. To replicate that type of performance on a week-in out basis is extremely difficult. That said, I thought Milwaukee did a great job of they got back, they got in their defensive positions, and they got in the way of shots. That was really the big thing. For them, if they're able to do that again, to get back, stay compact like that, get on a man, get in front of the ball, then they're going to frustrate them. But replicating that sort of performance is so difficult, in this game.
I think that was the biggest thing that I took away from that game. Not the fact that it was a shutout, but that Milwaukee got back to the fundamentals of what Milwaukee does. After the opening game where they gave up 21 points to Missouri, I think that was the first time they'd given up 20-plus points in maybe 3 seasons.
Yep.
It was a return to Milwaukee Wave soccer, the sort of soccer that Keith Tozer wants his sides to play. It'll certainly be difficult for the Blast to go in. We've seen a lot of tight games. I think I remember a 6-5 game, an 8-6 overtime game last year between these teams, so I don't necessarily expect a lot of goals, but it should be a very, very tight and very well-fought game between two coaches who obviously have a long-standing rivalry between each other.
And it'll be difficult too at home. When you're on the road like that, they're going into Baltimore, defending champs. You might have the inclination to have a little bit more defensive posture, stay within yourself, and take your chances when you can and counter. But at home, you got the home crowd behind you. Everybody's excited. You're going to be inclined to be a little bit more offensive too. So that sort of tight defensive shell might not be there. I'm not saying that you're going to have another 21 point affair for each team. But, I think there'll be a little bit more scoring on both sides.
I think that's a really interesting point, actually, because when you are the home team, even if you're the Milwaukee Wave and your fans know how you want to play the game, there is still a certain expectation. Home opener, you want to get out, you want to entertain the crowd, you want to put on a little bit of a show, and I'm certainly would be looking at guys like J.C. Banks, like Ian Bennett, maybe as guys who are going to, who will want to step up and put on that performance for the home crowd.
Well, you would use the same analogy as to why Baltimore didn't do as well. For they had the same. They had almost 9,000 people there.
Yeah.
They were pumped up. They were raising the banner from the previous season. You know what? As I said, anytime these two teams meet, it's going to be an interesting match. It's going to be a great game. No different this weekend.
Well, we open up the weekend schedule with the Pennsylvania Roar visiting the Rochester Lancers, as we mentioned earlier. And the big news for Rochester this week is the potential return of Mauricio Salas, who has also been such a key to that team's success over the last 2 seasons. Had a slight tear of his meniscus, it seems, but it sounds like the swelling's gone down to where he's going to be able to play through it a little bit. How big is that, especially to try and get him and especially Doug Miller off the side? Doug Miller, no goals so far this season, which through 3 games, Doug Miller only went scoreless, pointless in 2 games last season. For him to not have a goal through 3 games, somewhat shocking, I think.
Well, great point. Obviously, the return of a player of the caliber of Mauricio Salas is going to have a huge impact on the Lancers. You hate to use the word must win, but this is with an 0-3 start, playing an expansion team. This is a game that Rochester dearly needs to win.
Yes.
Doug Miller. I've been talking to Soccer Sam there. I mean, there's something physically not right with Dougie. He's not his usual self. He's had. I know that last game he went on with a potential concussion.
Sure.
With a player of that caliber to be scoreless so far, I mean, there's got to be something wrong with Doug. So hopefully, he gets healthy. And Doug's not the sort of person that complains or that makes a big deal about it. He goes out. His work ethic is incredible.
He's always going to give you his best effort.
His dedication to the sport and to the game are second to none. Which again, he's not going to come out and say that he's not 100%. But I find it hard to believe that he's 100% and not scoring goals.
David, I mean, the Raw, they're coming off a positive performance. They have. We know what Mauricio Salas can do from long range, from 3-point range. I think he's had 17 3-point goals over the past 2 seasons.
Yep.
The Raw, though, appear to have their own 3-point threat right now in Cordy Murray, who's come in. I think he's got a couple of 3-point goals already. Had the 3-point goal that brought the Raw within a point of the Silver Knights in their last outing. This could be maybe a little bit of a duel between the sharpshooters from distance.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting affair because both teams obviously coming in want to win, want to get that off break that. So, break that duck, get that first win, and I think both teams will be up for it. I think the question is, has Pennsylvania progressed enough that they're ready to get to that point yet? Have the new guys learned enough? Are the veterans back in sync? Are they together enough as a team? I think Rochester still has a solid core from where they were last year, almost a playoff team. So I think that they can be there. It's going to be difficult for Pennsylvania, though. I think Rochester's really going to be up for that one this weekend. I can see a shootout, goals flying from long distances, but it'll be interesting to see. Both teams will certainly be up for the affair.
The interesting thing for me is Rochester obviously has their new coach in Josh Reif, and he's been trying to instill a slightly more defensive attitude. The thing is, in a home game like this where you want to push, you're going to push forward, Pennsylvania's got some decent speed that if Rochester isn't careful, they could give up some 2-on-1s. The Raw could use that counter-attack, their speed to their advantage and maybe convert some opportunities. And if Pennsylvania gets a 2-3 goal lead, the pressure on Rochester to come back and get that victory, if they fall into another deficit, could be very strong indeed.
You can see Pennsylvania progressing literally game by game.
Yep.
I was able to see both of their games live as I was in Pennsylvania for their opener, then as in St. Louis for their second game for St. Louis's opener. And from the first game, you can see the acclimation process taking place. They had I believe 3 penalties in the first game on just like too many men in the field. Just simple line changes where again it's an acclimation process. That's decreased. Obviously, the game against Syracuse, they came within a point of pulling that
Didn't
game out.
didn't take a single penalty.
Well, again, so it takes time to get that mindset. I like to use sometimes the old, Norfolk analogy.
Yeah.
Where they had a lot of outdoor players that were getting acclimated. They hadn't played the game before. I think Pennsylvania's ahead of where Norfolk was because they've got some local players or local Philly players that have played the game
Exactly.
in the past. So they're not far away. You know what? As you just mentioned, I think if they get ahead in Rochester and all of a sudden Rochester sees this desperation, it could be a long night.
Well, we've got the two games coming up this weekend. We have the Pennsylvania Roar against the Rochester Lancers, 7 p.m. Eastern on Friday night, and then Saturday night, 6 p.m. Central Time, 7 p.m. Eastern, the Milwaukee Wave hosting the Baltimore Blast. Both games on YouTube. Who are your key players to watch in this weekend's action?
I'll go obviously to Rochester first, and I think Mauricio Salas, if he's 100%, is going to make a huge difference. And he's just an imposing figure out there. The shot in both feet is just lethal. You got an expansion team, so I'll be curious to see how Mauricio fares in his return. Then from Milwaukee, Ian Bennett came out like a ball of fire in the first game against Missouri, sort of quieted down. He's obviously a marquee player that always seems to score big goals. I look at Ian Bennett as one of the guys to watch.
How about you, David?
Yeah, I think from the from the Pennsylvania Rochester game, I think we talked about him before. I think I'm going to go with Jerry Gibson again. Just excited to see what he's going to do in that game. I think that how Pennsylvania is progressing, I like to see him continue on an upward trend. They're going to be without Tom Myers again for another match, so who's going to step up until he can get back, I think will be big.
I think the big guy I'm looking at in that Raw Lancers game is with Mauricio Salas coming back, with Patal Myers being out, Chris Williams is a guy that's really going to have to marshal the Raw's defense well. He's probably going to have to do some man-marking duties on either Salas or Miller when they're on the floor. He might have to play quite a lot of minutes this weekend because to make sure that the defensive shape holds in front of Peter Pappas in the Raw's goal. As far as the Blast and the Wave, definitely looking at someone like JC Banks, see if he can back up his performance against the Blast last time out. And then maybe a guy like Tony Donatelli, who is a very solid indoor player, can score goals from all kinds of angles. If he can find his form, if he can find the back of the net, I think it's going to spark the rest of the team into life a little bit and just give them that little bit of confidence they need going into obviously what will be a very tough environment at US Cellular Arena.
No, I agree. I might, from a Baltimore perspective, obviously Van Zela in goal is going to have to play play a top-notch game to keep his team into the game. Yep. And I've always liked Pat Healy. Pat always seems to come up and score big goals at key points in times during the season, during key games. I remember back in Rochester for their opener in Rochester, when Baltimore was on their run, he had a key goal, and he always seems to be in the right place at the right time.
Well, both of the games this weekend, as always, available on YouTube. You'll be able to look for links to all of the games on Twitter, Facebook, and our new Google Plus page. If you haven't checked that out yet, please do so. Chris, David, thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate the chat.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Thanks, Nicholas.
Thank you to producer Seth again for putting all of this together. And thank you for listening in. We hope you'll join us again this time next week. Until then, bye for now.